James Tybury's Wild Tales and Misadventures.
This is Reactor Radio. All radioactive, all stories, all the time. This week's story, straight from the Weird Files, it's Another Time.
The warm south wind stopped pushing through our little valley the first day of autumn, and the KTNO weatherman predicted an early winter blast. His map showed a low-pressure system, a dimpled swirl centered in tight isobar lines with a long sawtooth boundary stretching hundreds of miles west. It was a demented shark, baring its blue teeth at our town. The frontal boundary was poised behind the mountain range just to our north, but the cold air was hesitating behind those granite walls and wouldn't hit until after the next couple of days. I could see this made the carnival folks happy as I moved with the crowds, 2 rolls of quarters stuffed in my jeans. Sponson Carnival Company had erected a canvas city on the Meadowvale Shopping Center parking lot. The smell of mildew, old mothballs, rancid butter permeated the place, wafting coyly on the wind. For 3 blocks in all directions, people were drawn toward an odoriferous Pied Piper, that outlandish metropolis. Tents, recreational vehicles, and trailers formed a ring of suburbs surrounding a flashing downtown of colossal machines and rows of carnival game stands. Overhead, the great metal rides whirled, guarded by grizzled barkers behind flimsy tube barriers. I could hear the barkers singing chants and throaty calls above the noise of the sparking electric motors. Ride barkers competed with game barkers in a rising crescendo of vocal warfare, economic spiders casting for money on the wind. I watched the barkers weave their webs, separating the crowd from its treasure for a bit of excitement, flashing light, and intangibles. I fell into their trap as I sampled the wild thrills of Mad Hatter's Teacup, Roboflex, Spin Twister, Around the World, and Tamer attractions. I rode until I thought I would spew, and then I rode some more. Tumbling from the Spin Twister for the 5th time, I could take no more. I went looking for another entertainment around the smell of buttered popcorn. I found a low tent with a placard that simply read, Oddities. I thought this would be a good opportunity to settle my stomach, so I tossed 50 cents to the muscular guy at the entrance and stumbled inside. Incandescent lights glared from the tent roof, revealing faces floating in a sea of bodies. New arrivals were blinking and pushing toward the front of the milling crowd, and I joined in, all of us trying to get a better view. I heard my name called once, but I couldn't be sure of who it was. I arrived at the edge of the roped-off area and saw a tall, thin man in a bowler hat standing in the middle. He was commanding and stiff, a riding crop tucked neatly under his arm of his shirt, his dark eyes purposefully scanning the people in the room. He spoke above the murmuring people in a tenor voice that cracked like thunder in the confines of the tent. Come one, come all, to the most irreconcilable oddities of nature. There's plenty of room here, so everybody will get a chance to see now. No pushing. May I direct your attention to the rear entrance and Bertha May Beerson. He balanced his hat on his forearm and flourished his riding crop, bowing his head down so that his chin touched his chest. I suppose this was a gesture of respect, but I thought his little move rather queer. Several of the people around me removed their hats sheepishly. I suppressed the urge to feel atop of my head for what a hat I knew wasn't there. Beyond his little whip, the tent flap rustled slightly from a passing breeze. Then the flap parted violently, and a large woman glided in. Her size wasn't her oddity. Yes, sir, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Beerson is a rarity among rarities, a veritable cornucopia of confusion. Behold the bearded lady! There was a concerted intake of breath and staring eyes. Bertha paraded around the little ring in her outsized gingham, twisting the ends of her well-waxed mustache and pulling suggestively on her salt and pepper beard. I was appalled, disgusted, and amused. I fingered the milky dew above my lip and felt ashamed. The crowd swayed back and forth, caught between its desire and repulsion. Freak! A sweaty woman behind me stage whispered to her husband. "Hey, Joe," a boy from my school elbowed me, thinking I was his friend. "How would you like to take that out on a date?" I was embarrassed by the normal people around me, and I was still glad to see her glide out of view. James Mendelssohn comes to us directly from a sojourn on the South American jungle, where he braved piranha-filled rivers and head-hunting wild men to bring back the secrets of the Incas. The tall man winked at a little girl in the front row, who immediately placed her face in her mother's skirt. "Meet the human pincushion." Through the tent flap pushed an ancient, wrinkled, little bald man with tattoos all over his body. After showing off his withered muscles, he proceeded to hammer a spike into his nose. Each blow of the hammer brought murmurs from the crowd. My stomach was starting to do flip-flops. I didn't know if I could take much more of this crowd or the oddities either. He slid a yard-long sword down his throat and removed it with a flourish. Finally, he pierced his nose with a spike, looking like a little red-tanned bushman with a bone in his nose. The tall man's voice rose above the exclamations again, like a storm surge pounding a beach. "Ladies and gentlemen," he paused, allowing all attention to focus on him. "May I present David Sponson, the most astounding oddity of them all. He's the son of sea creatures, his evolution in reverse, and a man in name only. Meet Worm Boy." Two muscular men came into the tent bearing a short golden stretcher. Upon the stretcher writhed a man with no arms or legs and deep folds of royal blue velour. They set him away from the crowd and departed. Everyone stared in shock at his smooth torso, more intrigued by his wild gyrations than his deformity. After a time, Worm Boy rolled off the stretcher toward the crowd. He gurgled and thrashed his way to the edge of the ring, spittle dripping from the corner of his mouth. An electric shock went through the people. The center of the crowd began to push back away from the ring. People in the back were being pressed against the tent wall, and some began to panic. When Worm Boy began growling, people began leaving the tent. When he passed outside of the ropes, a mass of people exited, spewing from the opening like water from a burst dam, carried along by the crowd. My last glimpse was in the tall man, whipping Worm Boy back through the ropes, his riding crop slashing the air. I stumbled in a daze, in and out of shifting groups of sometimes recognizable classmates and acquaintances. I stepped by the ring toss booth, clinging to a tent pole to steady myself, and forced down the gorge. I think I had too much cotton candy. My parents were always telling me too much sugar would make me sick one day. That day had come. A wave of nausea bent me over, and I vomited, spewed, chewed popcorn and syrupy remains of blue cotton candy on the pavement at the feet of the family of four. After I heaved, I looked up to see the father, mother, and oldest daughter frozen with disgust. The younger sister pointed at me and yelled, "That guy barfed!" I didn't care what they thought. My stomach felt much better, and I gained a better appreciation for the fountain in front of the old courthouse. When my best friend Nectar appeared by my side, a quizzical look on his face. Nectar Paul Fleming acquired my friendship in the 8th grade at James Madison's junior high school. We bumped into each other in the boys' room for the first time we met. He was running with a gang of boys, and I was just hiding out. I like to avoid conflicts. He liked that idea too, so we hid in the last stall and talked all the way through 3rd period. Nectar was from Albany in upstate New York. Being the new boy made him a prime target for bully boys, not to mention his red hair and freckled face, or his name. The strangeness of his name was the result, he said, of his parents' wild years as young adults in New York City. They were beatniks, whose little juice bar was the talk of Greenwich Village in the late 50s. They ran as far away from their square parents and the Jersey burbs as they could, which wasn't very far, and made a go of it. When Nestor's mother was pregnant with him, and the juice bar failed, his father moved the family to Albany. In memory of their failed endeavor, they named their boy Nectar, a misspelling of nectar, and he was quick to point out. His parents were definitely a piece of work. His mother shared his own brand of wisdom with us. "You can't run away from your destiny," she would say while energetically tenderizing some meat or cutting onions, tears flowing down her cheeks. I wonder what his father smoked in that pipe he always carried around. That day in the bathroom, we decided that getting beat up or running with a bunch of pond scum was worse than being lonely. We wouldn't have to be lonely. We look out for each other and pull a few fast ones on the bullies and the system. Nectar was a mechanical genius and also very talkative, ready to expound on any subject, large or small, but his voice was too loud. Mr. Nurkowski caught us at the beginning of fourth period upon hearing Nectar's babble and dragged us to the principal's office by our ears. We cemented our friendship outside the principal's door, waiting for the dressing down we would get for skipping class. 4 years later, we were still best friends. Nectar and I were hanging around the front of the bowling alley that night. We had a full day of it, riding the rides, wasting our money, and checking out the babes. Nectar won a pair of goldfish, which he showed to me like a proud papa. 8 tries of the ring toss made him an instant daddy, but all I could think about was calculating their survival odds in Nectar's household. I was tempted to remind him of his other pet projects, like the white mice that got lost in the disposal, the hamster in the microwave, the cat, I don't even want to go there, and the ant farm fiasco, but I held my tongue and smiled at his happy remarks. Hopefully I wouldn't have to deal with them when their time came. We were sitting there in the low wall next to the Bolorama sign when she came around the corner. Our conversation stopped dead in the water. Nectar, me, and the fish were dumbfounded. Our eyes locked on the most beautiful woman in Meadowvale. The way she walked was like fine art. Her hips swaying like soft music in time with a slow primal beat. Her body parts were all put together well, from her perfect ankles to her reddish-brown, shoulder-length hair. Her eyes were the color of honey and were looking right into mine. God, she was beautiful. I didn't know about Nectar, but I felt like one of these newborn ponies I'd seen in nature shows on television, all legs. She walked right up to us and stopped, putting out her hand to me. "Hello, my name's Alicia," she said. Her full lips curved into the most sensuous smile. "And you must be," and she said my name. I never really knew how lyrical my name was until she said it that evening. I wiped my sweaty hand on my pants before taking hers, working hard to keep my heart from ripping a hole in my rib cage. I could feel the fine bones on the back of her hand with my thumb, her almond-colored nails peeking around the back of my hand. She had a reassuring grip that had said confidence and something else surprising and undecipherable. My eyes were all hers, and she knew it. "Julie Garner told me where I could find you." At that moment, I wanted to kiss Julie Garner, but I would have to wait in line behind half of the senior varsity football squad. Far from easy, Julie was just desirable. Every schoolboy's dream girl in the flesh. Julie was a hotshot blonde who didn't have to work at being popular. She was neither on the cheerleading squad nor the glee club, though her physical assets would have served well. Julie was the leader of the math team and quit the chess club for lack of challengers. In a way, you could say she was a nerd. She would always have something intelligent to say in the chemistry class we shared together, and I suspected that she memorized the periodic table but couldn't prove it. I saw her nose in books more often than not. I would never call her a nerd to her face. She was just too classy. She dated all the popular boys, going through them faster than a new wardrobe. Julie was a distant dream who, if she knew me at all, only passed pleasantries in the hallway. I never thought she knew who I was. I'd be grateful that she did. My reply to Alicia was less than artless. Hello, fish?" I immediately began mentally kicking myself in the ass with an oversized clodhopper. How stupid, how stupid, how stupid, repeating endlessly in my brain. Given my overheated condition, I suppose my response was adequate, but at the time my burning cheeks and pounding heart put perspective on hold. Alicia simply laughed, a good kind of laugh, not those girlish giggles that we had to endure from the young female freshmen. This laugh was intimately sexual, at the same time aloof, yet friendly and impossible to pin down. She certainly wasn't laughing at me, although I don't think she was laughing with me. She was laughing about some inscrutable something that women find humorous, and I loved it. "I'm sorry, let me try again," I said, smiling stupidly. "You don't have to be sorry." She smiled that smile again that made me feel weak and powerful all at the same time. "May I sit with you?" I elbowed Nectar to move over, which got him to shut his gaping mouth. She jumped up on the wall with a practiced ease, putting her arm around my shoulders to steady herself. She was still looking at me, and at this close range I could see there was some color in her cheeks that was not rouge. This was a good sign, I thought to myself. Her blue jean-covered thigh rubbed gently against mine as she spoke. "You must be Nectar," she said, leaning forward to look across at Nectar and his fish. "I never seem to see you two apart. I don't even remember what Nectar said, probably something as equally mindless as my mouthful." She smiled at him, which I'm sure melted his heart, and asked to see his fish. Holding the plastic bag up in the light of the Bolarama sign, she began talking to us about keeping tropical fish, operating on fish, proper fish environments, mating fish, the works. Her brother once owned a small pet store that catered to fish lovers. She was his #1 employee for a couple of summers, she explained. She gave Nectar specific instructions for the care of his charges. I prayed he would listen to what she had to say, but I knew the fish were goners. As she spoke about fish, I came to realize that I was falling in love with her. I thought it was real love anyway, not the lustful or sickly sweet variety, although I did not complain about those feelings when they intruded. I was impressed with her poise and grace, and for a better word, wholesomeness. Sometimes you think you know when it's right. We looked at each other as life passing in the street in front of us, at Nectar and his fish, and we talked about all the mysteries and mundane things our minds caught on to. Nestor's rusted-out, beat-up hulk of a 1976 Ford Pinto squatted wantonly in the middle of the empty lot, waiting to take us home. He called it his bicentennial car, and the way it looked, it might have been built in 1776. We all crammed in, me and Alicia in the back with Nectar piloting. Sputtering and blowing clouds of noxious fumes, the little hatchback came to life under Nectar's colorful urgings. He took care of his car about as well as his living things, it seemed. "Where to?" Nectar asked, gunning a little engine. "I parked my car over at the carnival," Alicia said, squeezing my knee. "At the carnival it is?" "To the carnival it is," Nectar caught my eye in the rearview mirror. He knew I wanted to be alone with this lady, but he looked a little concerned. He could just take a flying leap as far as I was concerned. He had his Betty Tyndall. This was my chance at love. The carnival was still open as we pulled up at the rows of parked cars. I gave Alicia my hand gallantly. She leaned into the passenger side and strapped the fish in with the seatbelt. "Thanks, Nectar. It was a pleasure meeting you." She kissed him on the cheek, and Nectar turned redder than usual. I'll take good care of him," she said, grabbing my arm. "I sure hope so," he murmured, looking into her eyes, searching for something, and at me. "If your parents ask, I know nothing, I hear nothing, I see nothing," he laughed. "Take care of him, and take care of yourself now." "I'll catch you on the flip side. Take this nectarine machine and get the hell out of here. I'll be all right," I said, playing the tough guy routine. He just smiled and gunned the car out onto the boulevard and away into the night. We stood there looking at the skyline and the stars above. The life glow of the town and the carnival behind us intruded on the sky, but further west the flatland stretched out into the darkness. The mountains to our north were lost in the blackness, but directly above the stars were ablaze with light. "You know," she began, "stargazing is much better in the mountains." "You don't say," I said, looking into her eyes. "Sure," she smiled, "but I know a way we can get a better view right here." She held my hand tighter and pulled me toward the carnival. "Come on." The largest ride in the carnival was the Ferris wheel, 70 feet high at its apex. It was placed off to the east side of the park, so it would not pose a problem for airplanes taking off and landing at Meadowvale Municipal Airport. I'd already been on it a couple of times today, and it was impressive. A nighttime ride might be another thing altogether. We moved purposefully toward the giant spinning beacon. To my surprise, the man running the machine was the human pincushion. He looked at us and saw the look in my eyes. "A man's got to make a living somehow, son. You want to ride or don't you?" He looked like he wanted to go home, but the glint in his eyes said something about sailors on shore leave and wild ports a call. I felt a bit unnerved. "It's my treat," Alicia said. She placed some money in the old man's hand and whispered something in his ear. "All right, doll, you better be careful up there." He winked at me. "You don't know what you're getting into, son." Laughing hoarsely, he sealed us in our chair and started the wheel turning. Round and round we went. Then the wheel slowed and stopped turning, leaving us at the top of the wheel. The Ferris wheel went black. Meadowvale, the carnival, and the glorious sky stretched out before us. All we needed to do was get away from some of the lights. She put her arm around my back, pointing to the sky above. The fuzzy band of Milky Way arched across the heavens. There's Aries, Pisces, and Aquarius, she said, pointing out different sections of the sky. Cassiopeia looks like a zigzag. See it? I see it. Those bright ones there? Yes, that's it. She moved closer. I could feel her warmth through my jacket. Ursa Major is behind us. See it? The Big Dipper, yeah. I leaned closer to her, and she looked into my eyes. You see the handle on the ladle? Her cheek brushed my lips. Yes, I whispered in her ear, seeing only her hair and the smooth curve of her lips. Follow the 2 stars to the end of the dipper and you hit the North Star. She looked at me, directly, her eyes clear and yearning. She answered my silent question. Polaris. She wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me like the world was ending. I felt like I knew all the answers to all the questions ever asked. All my fears and cares blew away in that moment. All of my world was in her moist lips and shining eyes. I was a compass pointing north. All too soon the spell was broken. The rattling and humming wheel came to life again, and down we came, back to the people in our earthly existence. Blinking our eyes in the bright lights, we climbed down from the wheel, smiling shyly. The old man only grunted something about crazy kids, waving us on our way. Where'd you learn so much about astronomy? I asked, trying in my juvenile way to form a double entendre. Our footsteps brought us closer to her car in night's ends as she pondered my question. My father has a special interest in stars, she finally answered. We continued along in silence, content in our company. Passing a trailer window, I saw Worm Boy and several others gathered around a table inside. The tall man wearing the bowler hat was there also, counting money. Well, we've taken in more than we did last week at Evansville, the tall man barked. Not bad for a first night. Hopefully Friday will be even better, said Worm Boy. That's when the weekend rush begins. That's all well and good, intoned someone with her back to me. But shouldn't you tone down the Worm Boy act, David? I mean, you nearly caused a panic in there today. When we get the really big crowds in, we could have a problem on our hands. Panic, hell, old Wormy there had 'em pissing their pants. If an underwriter came in today, we would have been up the crick. Worm Boy frowned. Yeah, I hear you guys every time, but damn it, the excitement is what draws the crowds. Maybe we ought to try using an open-air tent without doors next time. Alicia pulled me away from the window, impatient with my eavesdropping. I didn't realize you were peeping Tom. Wait till my parents hear about this. I chased her the rest of the way to the car. I thought about David Sponson on the drive home. We pulled up to my house, way past curfew. We kissed some more, but then my parents turned on the porch light. I was definitely busted. I opened the door to leave. She held my hand tighter, forcing me to pause. Would you go to the dance with me Friday night, she asked, like the history of the world depended on my answer. I looked into her eyes. How could I say no? Definitely, I smiled and kissed her one more time. I watched her car until it dwindled out of sight. Weather maps and cold winds occupied my dreams that night. I dreamed of rain and lightning and tossing seas. The old man's hoarse laughter came back to me, and I shivered, rolling in my covers. I woke up a couple of times, thirsty, drained, and too tired to try the stairs for a glass of water. Up I went above the clouds to the stars and flashing meteors, only to end up floundering in a deep ocean swells, gasping for breath as Sargasso seaweed pulled me under. I found myself wrapped up like a burrito in my covers the next morning, the alarm clock buzzing in my ears. Nectar and Betty were waiting by my locker after lunch. Well, man, how'd it go? Well, I said, thinking about what I wanted them to know. She asked me to the dance. Excellent, exclaimed Betty, her eyes lighting up. Since she had gotten her claws into Nectar, she had been trying to play matchmaker for me. Maybe she would leave me alone now. I felt 2 hands brush my neck, and then my eyes were covered. Guess who? I tensed and then relaxed. Alicia. You get the grand prize, she said, spinning me around. She kissed me full on the lips in front of everyone. I have a class next period, so I have to go. I won't be able to see you tomorrow at school. I have a doctor's appointment. I'll pick you up at your house at 6 o'clock so we can show you off to my parents. We'll go to the dance straight from there. My head was spinning from the kiss and her rapid-fire instructions. Okay, I said, a stupid grin etching my face. Nectar looked at me with cow eyes, and Betty smirked. Friday evening, Nectar and I got ready for our women. This would be the first time both of us had girlfriends at the same time, and we wanted to do it upright. We washed, we polished, we combed, we shaved, not that we needed to, and we slapped on aftershave. We smelled like our fathers, and we looked like baby men. We had on our best Sunday go-to-meeting duds with rainbow-colored suspenders hidden beneath our coats. Our bow ties were in place. Our wallets were in our pockets. We were ready for anything, or so we thought. Alicia's house was a sprawling ranch-style shoehorned into the west side subdivision of Plowman's Crossing. Alicia pulled me toward the door, and I followed like a lamb to slaughter. Her mother, a trim 42-year-old housewife, met us at the door in a high-collared, mid-length dress. Ms. Reynosa's smile melted any apprehension I might have had. She served me milk and cookies while Alicia went to her room to change. Her father entered the room with another man and introduced himself. They both wore simple brown tunics with stiff gold collars covering their necks to the jawline. I stood and shook hands as they eyed me up and down. Samuel Reynosa was a tall, imposing man, deadly serious in word and probably action. I didn't want to find out about how deadly he was in action. We did the usual father-boyfriend routine, feeling each other out. I promised to take good care of Alicia. She was his only daughter, he said, and he wanted me to never forget that. I smiled, and he did not. Alicia finally came out of the living room and took our breath away. She was in a beautiful low-cut peach mini dress. She wore a black choker around her neck with a white heart in the middle. Her hair was piled on top of her head in loose curls. I felt the same way I did on the day we met. She moved by my side, coming to my rescue. "Now, Daddy, have you been giving him the third-degree treatment? You know I always will." I could sense a slight softening of his voice, but his face was still hard as granite. "You going to another Pilots Guild meeting, Dad?" "Didn't you have one last week?" Alicia had hit a sore spot between her parents. Her dad didn't reply. Her mother only smiled. I was glad Alicia was on my side. "You see," she said to me, "my father is a member of a secret organization where men get together and do secret things their wives wouldn't approve of." I was intrigued. I'd never known anyone in a secret organization before. "Is your association related to flying airplanes?" I asked Mr. Reynosa. "Nothing as simple as that," he said, still chafing from his daughter's attack. "Ships?" I pictured a gaggle of river pilots in a smoke-filled room, Mark Twain look-alikes, telling tales about the good old days. "In a manner of speaking, yes," he rumbled, taking a large gold fez from a box on the table and placing it on his head. Mr. Herrera, his partner in crime, did likewise. "We better get going, Master Reynosa," Mr. Herrera interjected through his tassel. "You know how the guys get when we're late." "Late for stale cigars and poker, if I know you overgrown boys," said Mrs. Reynosa. "Now, dear, you know how important our work is to the community." Samuel Reynosa looked hurt. "Hrumph," was her only answer as she turned and went to the kitchen. Samuel Reynosa pulled a pocket watch from his tunic and looked at the time. He looked at his daughter and sighed, probably thinking about where all the time has gone. "I want you to take this," he said to her, pressing the watch into her hand. I noticed the watch was digital and had funny-looking symbols on its face. "I'll take good care of it, Daddy." She kissed him on the cheek, and his face relaxed for a second. Then he was all business. "I know I can trust you. I want you back here by 1 o'clock, no later." "Yes, Daddy." She rolled her eyes to me. "Just remember, it was a pleasure meeting you, young man. Make sure she gets back here by 1. "Yes, sir." I looked at his dark eyes and wondered about what I was getting myself into. Then they were gone. We left the house, waving goodbye to her mom. Alicia kissed me at the car and slid the watch into my coat pocket. "You hold on to that for me," she smiled, and I remember a song about being in heaven. The dance was a blast. Alicia and Betty loved punk rock, and Nectar and I loved to show off our suspenders. We did the rock lobster. We drank punch. We got funky. Disco was dead, and we were not in mourning. The slow dance finally came. We snuggled in close. We kissed, and I worked my way down to her neck. She stopped and grabbed her neck. "I'm sorry," she said dreamily. "I'm kind of sensitive about my neck." "Okay, I didn't mean to." She placed her index finger over my lips, and we continued dancing. After the song, she pulled me to the side and grabbed her coat. "Let's go somewhere more private." I didn't have time to say goodbye to Nectar, but I could see he was having a good time with Betty. Devo's whippet was pulsing from the speakers as we left. We went to my house. I could hear the peal of thunder in the distance as we pulled up. Dark clouds were starting to form to the north. A gust front blew leaves up around us and carried the first drops of rain to our doorstep. My parents were away at a party, and I didn't have any siblings to worry about. We went up to my room in awkward silence. The tapping of rain on the glass and its misty moistness made the room seem like the only place on earth. We moved together on the bed, our clothes dropping to the floor. I reached up and loosened her choker to reveal a smooth tan ring around her neck. It almost looked like a tattoo. She saw me staring. "It's just a birthmark, silly. Now make love to me." We made love on my bed. Lightning was flashing close now, illuminating our bodies in stroboscopic brilliance. Thunder exploded and rumbled all about us. A torrential rain washed against my window. I thought I was underwater on some wild ride. Then it happened. Arching her back in ecstasy, her neck began to glow. Brighter and brighter it glowed, until the room was illuminated in a green wash of color. Everything I saw began to shimmer. I felt a wave of dizziness break over me. I touched her glowing neck, and my fingers tingled from an electric shock. She moaned louder, pushing her body against me in a frenzy. Together we tumbled to the covers, spent. The green glow was gone, replaced by the warm afterglow of love. She held me close and kissed me weakly. I stared into her sensuous face, afraid of the questions that burned in my brain. The lightning and rain had stopped. Only the dark clouds remained. I fell into a fitful, dreamless sleep beside her. I woke up Saturday morning alone in my bed. The room seemed skewed, out of balance somehow, but I couldn't put my finger on the reason why. A note sealed with lipstick kiss was on the dresser. She would meet me at the shopping center that afternoon. Her perfume lingered, and I felt immensely joyful breathing her fragrance, a cross between rose and jasmine. It was a perfect day to be in love. I began brushing my teeth when I noticed the scar. Red and angry looking, the scar ran from my wrist around the back of my arm to the elbow. I was no medical expert, but I knew there was no possible way I could have been cut that evening and had this thing heal overnight. There were stitch marks where stitches or staples had been removed. I felt a cold sweat form on my brow, and the room began to spin around. I sat down on my bed and grabbed my phone. Alicia's mom remembered how nice I looked the previous night and thanked me for getting her home on time. No, she wasn't home, but I could call back later. All I got at Nectar's house was his father's answering machine. I wondered when his father had changed that greeting on it. Maybe Nectar wasn't awake yet. I knew if I hooked up with Nectar, he would know what to do. There had to be some logical explanation for my wound. Arriving at Nectar's house, I noticed a for sale sign in the front lawn. I didn't remember Nectar mentioning anything about his parents wanting to sell the place. Grass grew up around the porch higher than I remembered. I shook my head, still feeling dizzy. The scent of his father's tobacco wafted reassuringly through the screen door. I rapped on the door twice. Mr. Fleming came to the doorway, still clutching his pipe. His eyes grew wide with fear and then tight with anger upon seeing me. Hairs prickled on the back of my neck. He looked caught between wanting to throw himself through the screen and getting his shotgun. "You bastard," he said, slamming the door in my face. Total confusion mastered my thoughts. What the hell was going on? I paced the porch a couple of times, scratching my head, wondering what I should do next. The door cracked open and Nectar's mother appeared. "Why'd you have to come back here?" she asked. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "Can't you see how painful this is for all of us?" "I don't understand," I said. "Did something happen last night to Nectar? I was feeling sick and worried about all of this. I should have stayed with him at the dance." "Last night," she frowned, coming closer. "You're not getting off that easy. His blood is on your hands." She waved her finger in my face. 3 months ago, you irresponsibility killed my son. I'm never going to let you forget it." I stood there aghast, my mouth open, my head buzzing like a circular saw. "I've seen enough of you for the rest of my life," she screamed, tears welling up in her eyes. "Get the hell out of here before I call my husband. Get out." She slapped me on the face and fell sobbing onto the porch swing. Mr. Fleming's voice rose from the house. "Is everything all right out there?" Menace was in his clipped words. "Yes, dear." "You get out of here before I call the police." Her glowering eyes drove me off the porch. I was scared, angry, and alone. I was afraid to talk to anyone or even look people in the face. I walked numbly through the people on the street, heading for the only person who would be able to answer my questions. Meadowvale Shopping Center parking lot was dotted with pools of standing water. Carnival people were late sleepers, still sealed in their trailers and tents. Few were about when I crossed the asphalt. Those that were paid no attention to me. I went down the sidewalk and entered Nick's Pizza Parlor, a darkened hangout for high school set. Alicia was sitting in a booth in the back wall and nursing a soda. At least she seemed normal, making room for me on the bench next to her. I held her for a long time, weary and afraid to speak. I forced myself to lay everything on the table. I prayed she'd be able to help. "Nectar's dead," I finished. "All because of me." "I didn't think it would be this bad," she said, her finger tracing circles on the tabletop. She was incredibly calm about it. I don't understand. My voice was starting to get hysterical. What is it? What are you hiding? It, she paused, choosing her words, is a secret. You must promise me you'll never tell anyone about what I'm going to tell you. She searched my eyes. Is it a deal? Deal, I said half-heartedly. I just wanted the nightmare to end. She moved her head close to mine and spoke in a fast whisper, words rushing out like rain. My family and I are members of a race of human beings who have the ability to bend space and time. My father's lodge, the Pilots Guild, is a contact point for our people. Most of our people left during the Spanish Inquisition. Some of us chose to stay. My family is descended from those who stayed. You've got to be kidding me, I said, all my beliefs under siege. You expect me to believe this? Your people are space aliens or something? Either I was in some kind of horrible realistic nightmare or high on acid. No, we're human beings. We're persecuted for our abilities during the Dark Ages, and believe me, they were the darkest from the stories I've read. So we went underground here on Earth. Now we serve the needs of races throughout the galaxy, so my father says. Anyway, how do you explain your friend's death? Maybe I'm suffering from loss of memory, or maybe I'm crazy, I thought to myself. I met Nectar 3 days ago in front of the Bolorama. She squeezed my hand, trying to force me to believe. I can't believe this, I said, pulling my hand away. You say your people bend space, but I haven't seen any travel brochures to Jupiter. I was becoming hysterically smug. You experienced it and you don't believe. How do you think people will react, or the government? Humanity is just not ready for this, which is sad because we're part of humanity too. No, you're not human. I slammed my fist down on the table. All the prejudice and evil fear welled up from the dark corner of my soul. You're a damn freak. I was sorry I said it, even as I said it. But it was too late to take back. I was proving her point, even as I denied it. She stared at me like she was seeing something for the first time, or a bug. Oh, I'm human, and I have feelings too. You know nothing about love. Her eyes glistened as she held back her tears. I clasped her hand, holding on to the only one who could bring me back from this insanity. I felt warm tears run down my face. Why can't you just make it go back? It's not as easy as that. Please understand. I did not want this to happen. I was not supposed to have my first event until I was 20. You picked a hell of a time. I didn't pick anything. Please try to understand. I'm trying real hard to understand. Forgive me. I looked into her hurt eyes and found love for me there still. I felt like a damn baby. Can't your parents help? As far as they're concerned, Nectar's been dead for 3 months. We were at the nexus of change, so we retain memories of the world before it changed. As you move further away from the nexus, this effect drops off rapidly. At least that is what I've read. If I told my parents, they would pack me off-world someplace. We would never get Nectar back, and we would never see each other again. I only sat there rubbing my eyes with a napkin. There's one thing I can do. I can try to enter the event state again, but it's risky. There are no guarantees we would accomplish anything. We might make matters worse. Things can't get much worse than they already are. I bent the straw from her soda back and forth. I hoped she would be able to do the same as easily with time. At midnight, I climbed in her bedroom window as planned. She was waiting and helped me keep from knocking everything off her nightstand. She'd locked her door and the lights were dim. I noticed a papier-mâché piñata of a giant blue bird hanging over her bed. How romantic, I whispered jokingly. She put her arms around me. I'm scared, she said. I am too, I replied. She tried meditating to get into her event state, but that didn't work. She tried stimulating her neck. She gave that up after a half hour in frustration. Everything she tried failed. Maybe we have to... She smiled. There's nothing else you can do? I asked nervously. Shut up and kiss me. She laughed sadly. We made love slowly in the darkness, working hard to forget the pain. Around 1:30 it happened. The green light engulfed her neck as we moved together. Her hands ran through my hair and over my back. I could see the light pulse, and I became dizzy again. The scar on my arm was gone. I looked in her beautiful eyes, in her face, praying that she'd be able to control these powerful forces. I love you, William. She smiled her sensual smile. Before I could reply, the green light took her and darkness fell over me. I regained consciousness in a fuzzy glow of early morning. I was relieved to feel her warm body next to me. I rolled over, feeling a twinge in my back, and I kissed her neck and shoulder. She rolled over and put her arms around me. I noticed the blonde hair too late. Twice in one night. Not bad for a 30-year-old, Julie Garner said, smiling familiarly. Julie? Yes. She looked impatiently in my eyes, as though waiting for a bus. I felt embarrassed holding her this way. There was something wrong with the way she looked. Spit it out, lover boy. I think I better go home. Her look of astonishment would be hard to duplicate. Are you saying you want a separation? I hadn't expected a response, so I decided to play it safe. Oh, no, I think I had a bad dream, that's all. Oh, boy, I thought, this mess is way out of hand. You should get up and throw some water on your face. Get a drink of water. You don't look so good. She pushed me away and rolled over. I thought her advice was pretty good, considering the circumstances. So I went to the adjoining bathroom, closed the door, and turned on the light. The man staring at me from the mirror bore a striking resemblance to my father. I splashed water on my face and looked again. It was me, all right, only older. I felt the stubble that grew on my face and my not-so-firm stomach. I was amazed at the transformation that had taken place. I felt calmer and somehow wiser, but my mind was still that of an 18-year-old. Maybe Alicia was older, too. Maybe she would have more control, or so we could try and get it right one more time. I wanted to cling to something, hoping it all wasn't a delusion. And what of Nectar? I left the bathroom and went to the closet, searching for some clothes and a jacket. Julie heard me rustling around the closet. She sat up and brandished the clock at me. It's 4:30 in the morning. What do you think you're doing? I'm going to take a walk. I think some fresh air will do me good. I'd heard that once in a movie. All right, just remember you promised to take Linda and Stacy to the carnival tomorrow. I will, don't worry, I said, zipping the jacket up. I'll always worry about you, Julie murmured, falling back into sleep. Out into the night I fled on a quest. The street I was on was one of the older sections of town. That was the only nice thing about this mess, I thought. The layout of the town wouldn't change very much. I hoped. I took East 4th Street west and turned up Independence Avenue. The new cars I saw were fantastic, all streamlined and fast-looking. I did recognize some of the older cars, gray and quiet in the back driveways. I felt like a living time machine, a lifetime of future shock all in one day. I arrived at Nectar's house just as the sun's rays rushed from the east horizon, touching the second-floor cupola where Nectar's room was. I bounded up the steps and knocked on the door, momentum carrying me where my mind feared to go. Nectar's father came to the door, wrapped in a short terry cloth bathrobe. Well, hello, son. What brings you here this early in the morning? I came by to see Nectar. Is he awake yet? Mr. Fleming frowned and came out onto the porch. Did Nectar have another fight with Alice again? He pointed the stem of his pipe toward the north side of town. Oh, no, I just thought he might be spending the night with you, I lied. Nope, he hasn't mentioned any plans like that with me. He stuck his hands into the pockets of his bathrobe and pulled out a pouch of tobacco. He sat down on the porch swing and began loading his pipe with the stringy stuff. I'm sorry, maybe he was pulling my leg. You know how Nectar can be sometimes. Ain't that the truth? You know I have to deal with his mess from the past 31 years. Believe me, I know. Thinking fast, a plan materialized in my mind. In that case, could you do me a favor? Sure, name it, he said, swinging back and forth. I seem to have misplaced his mailing address. Can you give me a copy so I can mail him a little surprise for his next birthday? I winked at the old man, and he smiled. No problem. He jumped up and moved to the door. I'll have that for you in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. I made my way to Nectar's house on the north side. It was a rambling old Victorian in need of repair, just the sort of place I pictured Nectar's house would look like. There was a new Jaguar and one of those aerodynamic bubbles in the driveway. I guess he was doing well for himself. I wondered about his Alice. This Alice Mr. Fleming had mentioned. Could that be Alicia? That didn't make sense from what she told me about the nexus of change, but I could still hope. A woman came to the door. Hello, Alice, I hesitated. Yes, William, she asked, looking annoyed and sleepy. She was not Alicia. My hopes were dashed, but I continued on. May I speak to Nectar? Sure, come on in. You're kind of early today, aren't you? Well, I flubbed it. I couldn't think of a suitable lie. I'll go get him, she said, giving me a strange look. You go to the kitchen. I went down the hall to the kitchen and found a little boy in a cowboy outfit eating toaster pastries. Uncle Bill, he exclaimed, pieces of pastry flying from his mouth. Faster than I could think it, he had latched himself onto my leg, smearing strawberry filling on my inseam. Hey, Squirt, I said, prying him off my leg. Thankfully, he went back to eating, as little boys are wont to do. Nectar stood in the kitchen doorway. Okay, what are you doing here at 5:30 in the morning on foot? Did Julie throw you out? I didn't see your car in the driveway. Nectar, I grabbed him around the neck and hugged him like the long-lost friend he was. All right already, he yelled, grabbing me by the shoulders. I can understand Tommy's early morning hug fest, but you too? Alice came into the kitchen, muttering about grown-up boys. Man, you look old. Well, you're no spring chicken yourself, he said diffidently. I'm sorry. I've got a major malfunction. I need your help. Alice raised her eyebrows at my choice of words. Come into my study, he said, leading me away from his wife. I told him everything. I spilled my guts on his desk and let him pick through them. I asked him what he thought. I think you need a shrink. What? I stammered. Now hear me out, he said, holding up his hand. Yesterday you were the most solid, no-nonsense person I know. Now you come to me with this. How am I supposed to react? You're wacky. Thanks for the psychological support. I'm sorry, man. I just don't know what to make of all this. He paused in thought and then continued. Listen, if you can produce this Alicia person, I could start to believe you. Don't you remember that night at the Bolorama, the three of us? Yes, I do. It was Julie who was the third person. You know all this. You were there. No, I don't. Look, you've been my best friend for the past I count on my fingers, 16 years. Can't you suspend disbelief a little? For your own good, I think not. A pained expression crossed his face and then was gone. I'll always be here if you need me. You should go home and get some rest, Will. He patted me on the back and led me toward the door. I'm sorry, just forget about all this. I'll just have to figure it out on my own, I said, going down the steps. As long as it's important to you, I won't forget. Are we still on today at noon for the carnival? I could see his smile had never dimmed over the intervening years. Sure, we'll be there. I wondered about all the hell I had put my friends and family through over the years. Alicia was right. I didn't know anything about love. One disappointment followed another. Alicia's house had been owned by the same family for the past 25 years. They never heard of the Reynosas. There was no listing for the Pilots Guild at the library, the Rotary, or Meadowvale Chamber of Commerce. There were only 2 Reynosa families in town, and they shared no relation to Alicia's family. By noon, I was exhausted. The answers to my problems were hidden from me on Earth and too far to reach in the night sky. I could only hope that she was alive somewhere thinking of me. As I went home by the shopping center, I saw an old piñata blowing along the sidewalk. It blew to the feet of an old white-haired man who kicked it aside. The tattoos on his arms were faded, but I recognized him as the human pincushion. As I approached, he looked up at me, shading his eyes from the sun. Hello, sir. Do you remember me? I said, thinking of words to say. 12 years ago, you were running the Ferris wheel. Hello there, son, he said. Yes, I remember, I think. You were with the little lady who paid me to stop the wheel at closing time, right before the big storm. 1982, or was it 3? He held his head in recollection. Yes, I exclaimed, hope bursting inside of me. You know, that was the only time I got to do a request to do that. How's that little blonde doing? Are you two still together? His mouth curved into a sailor's smile. I felt like I'd been slapped. Throughout the day I saw the tattered piñata gutted and ripped into one long, colorful shred, rolling along with the wind. Gusts had moved it through the length of the lot, over a curb and around the side of the shopping center, where it was held, rolling back and forth in the eddies of windbreak. I noticed it then because of its tenacious journey. Yet I immediately realized my folly. That festive ribbon was a captive of the wind, with no designs of its own. Later that day it blew into Independence Avenue, where the traffic pounded it into the pavement. Its journey was over, its colors turned to a gray paste. Julie had been cleaning out the attic. Boxes were strewn about the living room like little square islands, some marked for Goodwill, others with the names Julie, Linda, Stacy, William on them. On top of one box I found a gold watch with an inscription in the back. Samuel Reynosa, our loving father. Julie walked in and saw me holding the watch. I found that in the jacket pocket of your old suit. You know, the one you used to wear in high school? She held me around my chest. Do you know anything about it? A friend of mine in high school gave it to me, I answered, but it doesn't work anymore. I kissed her and left it for the Goodwill collection. I had a lot of growing up to do. A week later I found a fish tank. I keep tropical fish in my study now, and sometimes, when I feel a little lost or outside of myself, I look at them swimming around in there. I mostly stare at the pictures of my daughters, my graduations, or the diplomas on the wall, and wonder about another time.
And so ends today's story. Be sure to like, subscribe, and smash that notification bell.